I'm Susan. I'm the one who sent the email that you guys received and you signed up. I'm with Caravan Studios. Caravan Studios is a division of TechSoup. TechSoup is a global nonprofit that helps other nonprofits with their tech needs. So we started as a mentor matching program in 1987, and then we became a software distribution program, and now we're a global organization that does a lot more than just sell software to nonprofits. We have all sorts of programs. So if you know, we also do sell software to nonprofits at high discounts. So if you know 501c3 nonprofits, you should tell them about TechSoup. We also serve libraries. We're global. And the division I work for is called Caravan Studios, and our division builds software with nonprofits. So what that means is we build platforms and apps for different causes. So you can learn more about that at caravanstudios.org. This Meetup is a combination, as I mentioned, of a few different meetups. It's part Community Managers Meetup, and part Public Good App House Meetup, and part, it's actually 3 meetups in one. It's also part Women in Tech series. We started a Women in Tech panel series that we're going to be doing regularly, so you're in all of those events at once. We're really happy to have people from all of those different worlds on the panel and in the room. The event is sponsored by Kintone, and Nicole will be telling you something about Kintone in a moment, and you are in honor, and honor is also a sponsor of the event. I'm going to hand it off, but I wanted to mention that what you see right here is the back channel, and as you can see, it's quite quiet. I like it to be more noisy. So if you guys could use the hashtag if you're tweeting, Tech4Good so hashtag Tech4Good you'll be on that, and we can see the back channel. It's also being live streamed on Facebook, so there are people that will be watching it and also contributing that will help us kind of hear what people's questions are. And I think, one more thing before I hand it off, which is on May 31st, we'll have a Public Good App House demo event in the city at Eventbrite headquarters on May 31st. So if you're on my list, you'll know about it. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it to Chris of Honor.
Hey guys, how are you? So I guess the best way to describe honor is putting the situation of what a lot of us go through. So what happens when our parents get older? Like, what do? A lot of the times there could be a problem where you have a family member who's unable to take care of themselves. And in the past, that's kind of like where our CEO came from, where he had a family member who was unable to take care of themselves, and trying to find a solution for that was not easy. Trying to get a caregiver to come home, give reliable, consistent, and trustworthy care is not easy to find in the market. Very fragmented. For anyone, it's very complicated. And we wanted to change that. It shouldn't be that hard to take care of our parents. They took care of us. Our elders did great jobs teaching us values, and we created a platform to make it easy so that once someone gets older and is unable to fend for themselves, instead of uprooting many lives, having someone move across the country or move out of town and move in with someone, you can actually use our platform to get a reliable caregiver to someone who you can communicate on the daily. And that's what we want to do. We want to make it easier for elders to live their lives peacefully, happy, with honor. And that's what we did. We have one of the best teams in the area, and we're doing great things. So thank you for joining us in our space. I hope you guys are enjoying the food. We have great panelists here, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to
Yeah, so we got a little lab action here, but we'll hold on to this.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. You might come on in. Oh, you guys are coming around. Very good. Either way works. Want some more people? Let's see, can you hear me okay through this, or should I talk through here? Yeah. Okay. Talk through here. So, hi everyone, welcome. I'm so pleased to see all your smiling, beautiful faces. My name is Nicole Jones. I'm the Director of Marketing at Kintone. And Kintone is a no-code platform to seamlessly share information and data with your team so that you can work better, smarter, and on one centralized platform. So with that, just want to remind you again, everyone, to join the conversation tonight by twittering at us. Twittering at us. The hashtag is Tech4GoodWomen, and you'll see your tweets come on through here. So with that, I just want to jump on into what we're going to be talking about tonight. So tonight we're talking about how tech can provide human support at critical moments in our lives. to make us feel safe more than anything. So from online harassment, mental health for employers, workplace issues, or employees rather, workplace issues and caretaking of loved ones, our panelists are here to share how their companies are changing the way society thinks about mental health and family care with tech. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump into introductions for each of our fabulous panelists here, starting with Sandy Jen, sitting in the middle here. She is a co-founder of Honor, a home care company that helps older adults continue to live and age in their own homes with greater joy, comfort, and grace. Honor provides an end-to-end modernized service that helps families manage care of their loved ones and empowers a professional caregiver workforce with respect and technology. Prior to Honor in 2005, Sandy founded and led the engineering team at Mevo, which was later acquired by Google in 2012. In her spare time, she loves spending time with her kids, her dog, rock climbing, and mentoring new entrepreneurs. Let's just give her a hand and welcome her. Our second panelist is Erica Johnson, co-founder of Modern Health. If you can just give a little wave. Erica is the co-founder of Modern Health, an emotional well-being platform for employers. Before starting a company and going through Y Combinator, Erica was a neuroscientist researcher and full-stack developer with over 10 publications in peer-reviewed journals from her time in academia. Her career for the past decade has been at the intersection of neuropsychology and technology, designing and building digital assessments and brain health tools. Let's welcome Erica. Next up, you've got Liz Lee. She's the founder of Online SOS. Liz Lee has 10 plus years of experience in building partnerships, programs, and products across cross-functional teams in corporate and startup environments. As a two-time entrepreneur, she founded the first and only nonprofit organization in the US called Online SOS to provide dedicated professional support for online harassment. She served as a former investor of VC and consumer and tech startups at Morgan Stanley. Warm welcome for Liz. And last but not least, Jamie-Alexis Fowler. She is the founder and executive director of Empowerwork, which provides immediate confidential support for difficult work situations via text. She's a seasoned leader with a track record of building agile, high-performing, healthy teams. She's led marketing at a $100 million reproductive health international NGO, run operations for a national post-abortion counseling nonprofit, overseen marketing at Code for America, and launched an investigative newsroom. Her work has been featured in TechCrunch, Slate, Fast Company, and Forums. A warm welcome to Miss Jamie-Alexis. And for all of our panelists tonight. So let's go ahead and dive in. We're just going to go popcorn style here, and starting about your experiences. And what are some of the personal experiences that influenced you thinking about health, support, and caretaking that then motivated you to come forward with a better solution compared to what's out there right now? Whoever wants to dive in, don't be shy. I'll start. Yeah, well, I'm the host, right, so I should. So one thing that we were specifically looking forward to do with Honor was to have huge impact. A lot of the founders, we all come from social media backgrounds, and so, like many young entrepreneurs, we wanted to work on something that we used. No one pops out of college thinking I'm going to go work on senior care. They do think that when they get a little older. And one thing that we were particularly interested in, which I think relates to the caretaking, is that we were very interested in the caretaker, the professional caregiver who's generally a low-wage worker. And we always had this goal of what can we do for low-wage workers, because unlike you and I, where we move from job to job, we can just bring our resume along with us. If you're a pick and pack worker, you're a waitress, you're a hostess, or you're a dishwasher, it's really hard to bring that with you. And if you're a home caregiver, it's really hard to bring that experience with you with something real and provable. And so one thing that we were particularly interested in, I think we really hooked on with the goal of Honor, was that could we empower the caregiver? And so what that translated to was a sort of a fundamental operating principle at Honor, which is that we can make the caregiver better. They can then take care of other people better. Because if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of other people. And so that's really flipped, and it has become the root of how we build product services and how we look at caregiving.
as not just from the client perspective, but actually from the caregiver perspective.
Sure. I'm actually kind of curious, how many of you in this room have read that viral BuzzFeed article about millennials being the burnout generation? All right, well, I don't necessarily have a personal story to share, but what I can tell you is from talking to 40 different something employers, Facebook or Uber, Google, and in talking to 1,000 different millennials, there was a common denominator. People had difficulty accessing care, finding a coach, a therapist. There's an epidemic of loneliness on the rise. And so when my co-founder Allison and I, we started brainstorming what could possibly be psychological services that could scale, we thought, why don't we actually try building Modern Health as the first mental health platform for all employees? So in essence, we sell mental health benefits to employers to offer that to their employees. And we do that because we feel like insurance doesn't work for anyone who's tried to find a therapist or a coach through insurance. That's a huge blocker. 97% of employees or employers actually have something called an EAP that hasn't been innovated upon since 1970. And so we decided enough is enough, and we're going to build our out-of-network network and build a digital solution to scale cognitive behavioral therapy.
So online SOS was born out of a personal experience where right out of college I was stalked, threatened, and extorted online, and it was anonymous and almost 10 years ago. And so back then online harassment wasn't a known term. But I was sitting at Morgan Stanley looking at my dual screen, seeing people committing suicide as a reaction to what was happening online. And then on the other screen, there were valuations. I was investing in social media companies. And so I thought, enough is enough. Let's tackle this problem. And so we started out by giving free psychological support to people who were targeted and threatened online, and that's evolved. We've built on our direct service experience to share information on what to do when you're experiencing online harassment.
Like, I want to ask other people questions too, to like help somebody. Similar to Liz, I also had a personal experience. I think for those, and I won't ask for a show of hands, but if you're working in the modern workplace today, chances are you're going to face some sort of really challenging situation. And for me, I think we're familiar, with the Susan Fowler Uber memo that came out a couple of years ago, and around that time. Someone connected to me through my distant network, and she had leveraged the heck out of LinkedIn to figure out who she knew, who she could have a conversation with about what she'd experienced at work. And by happenstance, a friend of a friend suggested me because I have been a long-term manager and supported a lot of people on my teams and have had personal experiences myself. In her situation, what struck me was that she was working in a place that unfortunately, would never buy a Modern Health or an owner. Most working Americans are in situations where they're working in places where their company doesn't have HR or much less any other resource, and she was in that case. So she was in a small company, it was less than 10 people. There was really no available internal resource for her to navigate what she'd experienced. And I left that conversation thinking, like, there must be something that exists that people can turn to that's third party, that's not tied to the company. And a deep Google search led to the fact that there wasn't. And that doesn't mean there needed to be something, but there was definitely this moment of like, why is there this big gap? What exists, and how can we follow the need to understand what should be there, or what would be most helpful? So over the course of hundreds of interviews with folks who had experienced these types of challenges, as well as hundreds of interviews with like labor organizers and HR specialists and labor attorneys and so forth, what we really found was that people want something that was immediate and confidential. And so what that comes down to is like, you have something happen in your workplace, you pick up your phone and you text your best friend. Well, that can be amazing for venting, But maybe your best friend has also never had a surprise performance improvement plan and like doesn't know what that is. Or maybe your friend isn't really unsure how to navigate harassment in the workplace or what that looks like. So Empowerwork offers immediate confidential support that's discreet. You can do it in the elevator, you can do it in the bathroom. You know, we get a lot of texts that are like, sorry, my manager walked by. I'm like, that's fine, we get it, like you're at work. And so we provide that support through trained peer counselors who are available throughout the week when people are navigating something challenging.
Thank you. So lab working, can we hear anything or
Should
not
pass it
quite?
back?
Let's pass it on back, yeah. Thank you. All right, thank you for sharing a little bit about the start and some of your experiences that led you to this foundation. So we'd just love to learn a little bit more about your products and services. How exactly do they work and who are they for? We're starting with employees, and say you work at Facebook and we rolled out Modern Health at Facebook. All Facebook employees would receive access to an app. So we develop across web app, iOS, and Android. And through that app, you would actually get access to digital programs, evidence-based digital programs, meditation recordings, and then you get matched to professional support. And we really think that human element is key. So this could be the form of a coach or a therapist, depending on what your needs are. I think it's interesting that in the United States, we're still on a fee-for-service based medical system. We're testing out value-based care at Modern Health. So in essence, it's a stepped care model for triaging folks to the right care at the right time, right? When you think about mental health, the same is true for physical health. Everyone has it, you know? It just depends on where you're at in your mental health journey. So you could be in the 20 to 25%, you know, suffering from clinical anxiety, clinical depression, bipolar. You could be in the middle of the distribution, new parent, burnout, stress. That puts you more at risk to being in the red zone. Or, you know, you could be sort of in the green, cruising and happy. So no matter what your mental health needs are, we could triage you to the right care at the right time. If you're an introvert, you could go through our digital courses and online programs. But we do believe in matching folks to the right professional support as well. Is that clear? Okay.
So I think Chris did a little intro in the beginning, but we provide care in the home. So if your grandmother, your mother, your father, etc., any loved one requires a little bit of help with what we call ADLs, so activities of daily living, and these are things like getting out of bed, brushing your teeth, going to the bathroom, things that you and I take for granted, but if you can't do 1, 2, or 3 of those things, it becomes a lot more difficult to live home independently. And so we match a qualified caregiver to a client. Our product is actually the human that goes to your home. It's not actually an app or a website, and we do have those things, but we don't require any technology use from our clients. They can just pick up a phone. We have a whole staff of people who are happy and willing to answer the phone. And then what we do with the caregiver is that we actually give them an app to use to empower them to provide better care. They have transparency, they have schedules, they have flexibility, they have choice. And so the whole system is, it's not just matching, it's literally the entire care system. So if you are new to home care, which a lot of people are, we definitely try to be the helpful hand, the sort of the guiding team to help navigate that whole journey.
So we provide for individuals checklists of information on what to do based on your experience of online harassment, so based on the type of experience, and also based on what you want to protect. So whether it's your emotional well-being, your physical safety, for example. And then we provide information to stakeholders on what we're seeing from requests from individuals. So we've worked with social media platforms, law enforcement, and other NGOs to ensure that the needs of individuals are being recognized and met.
I just love that it's all very human-centered, and I think we were talking about this and we were prepping, is like using technology in a human-centered way is a big part of how Empowerwork started, and I think there's someone I greatly admire who talks about, you know, humans don't scale and tech isn't human, and I think each of these ways in which we're approaching things is that blend, where it's like, how do you leverage the best of what we all have, which is connection, with the benefits of technology. And that's certainly what we see with Empowerwork, that the reason we've chosen SMS is not because it's like the cool, sexy thing to do. It's like literally what people told us they wanted. We were like, we get a lot of people who are like, well, why don't you do phone calls? And I was like, well, phone calls may be the perfect thing for, a care provider and another person. It's amazing. For us, it was like, people were like, I don't want anyone to overhear me in the office. I don't so people would constantly like, well, would you move to voice? 100%, we would move to voice if there was a need for that. Because we want to follow what is most important for the folks who are experiencing the pain point and really meeting people where they are. So it's not an explanation of what we do, but I feel like we meet people where they are over SMS, and you connect with a real human. But we use technology to connect people if needed with like additional resources or tools or information. And of course we use technology for efficiency and operations, but like when you connect with Empowerwork, you are connecting with a live person. We have some people who are like, is this a chatbot? And the volunteer's like, it's me! I'm a real person.
All right, and really something that does connect the four of you is that the services you've built, in many ways, tackle stigma that comes with asking for help in times when we're our most vulnerable. So how are the services that you've built changing these stigmas in the way that we reach out for help? If you'd like to start it off.
I'm a huge fan of positive psychology. It sounds very frou-frou, but one of my personal heroes is Dr. Dacher Keltner, a neuroscience professor at UC Berkeley. He's really good friends with the Dalai Lama. And there's this new movement in positive psychology. Have any of you heard of reframing? Just nods. The traditional model of psychology is very clinical and very questionnaire-based. You hand someone in a doctor's office something called a PHQ-9 questionnaire or a GAD-7 questionnaire. So it's all about deficits. Do you have trouble sleeping? Do you have stomach pain? Do you have restless leg syndrome or lack of motivation? And do you feel tired, right? Get the idea. In positive psychology, you can reframe all this to get at the same neural correlates, but with a positive spin. Like, do you feel calm and relaxed? Have you woken up feeling refreshed? And so our entire product reframes psychology in a very positive way. So it feels fun, it feels very engaging to access care. So it actually doesn't feel like a mental health platform. It actually feels like a personal growth platform. And so we found that by using positive psychology principles, we can engage everyone. You can find a way to engage in the platform, and you can actually find a way to teach yourself cognitive behavioral therapy, which in a lot of meta-analysis papers have been shown to be just as effective as pharmacological agents. But what people don't know is it's actually preventative as well. So when you learn mindfulness, it can actually stave off anxiety and depression. And essentially, we've gamified it. It's almost like Headspace meets Coursera. So you teach yourself these tools as well. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of positive psychology.
I think we just did that. We reframed senior care. I think a lot of you will remember those commercials on TV where like this woman falls down the stairs and it's like this, oh my God, I'm hopeless. I fall and I can't get up. And it's this horrible commercial that like strikes fear into your heart. It's like full of like red arrows and like exclamation points, and it's all fear-based. So a lot of the conversation and dialogue around taking care of older adults was about fear. It's like, oh, mom can't do this, mom can't do that. And so one reason why we chose amber as our company color was it's bright, it's positive, it's, there are a lot of things that older adults can still do. And so the conversation that we want to have is that to bring sort of talking about aging and dying and our families and older adults to the surface, right? No one ever tweets or Facebooks about how mom broke her hip and now I need home care. And for many people who have to live with home care, it wasn't like they prepped for it. They didn't have the conversation with mom 10 years ago. It was more like mom fell. Falls were probably the #1 reason that people end up losing mobility, they fall, they go to the hospital, and then the doctor's like, mom can't take care of herself anymore, she needs help. And now all of a sudden, you as an adult child, a spouse or family member are like, oh my God, I don't know anything about home care, and now I have to become an expert in home care. What do I do? And so what Honor wants to do, in the, sort of the long mission there, is to change the dialogue, have families have these conversations earlier, but also provide a service where it's transparent, it's not scary. There are people to help you. There are no dumb questions. We understand that everybody in the situation is usually very vulnerable, they're highly emotional, it's really messy, right? Like my mom's needs are super different from your mom's needs, and maybe my mom's like super crotchety and like, hates everybody wearing red. Like that happens, right? So how do you deal with that? So those are the kinds of issues that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And so that's one of our goals, is take these sort of individual, very personal moments, but scale it in a way that we provide the service for everybody who needs it nationwide and eventually, and obviously internationally, would be amazing.
So the way we've also thought about reframing stigma, well, is initially you would see it in the press too, but we would be using words like victim of online harassment, and really shifting from this victim mindset or even naming yourself as a victim to say, hey, there hasn't been a great phrase, but we've moved towards targets of online harassment, or if you're experiencing online harassment, and then really what a lot of the work that we've done is around naming, because people weren't able to name what was happening to them. And so for us, our main focus around removing stigma from the individual and really validating their experience, especially in our content and how it was delivered and like how it's framed on our website as being empowering rather than having to fix something or react to something. So
yeah, I love your point about language, and we see that a lot. A big piece of what we try to unlock is like, if something is happening at work, it doesn't have to fall into a particular bucket. So what we found is that the bucket that people experience is work. Like, it's happening in my workplace, but I may not have a name for it. So we see a lot of things like, my paycheck was off. Well, that person could be experiencing wage theft. They could be experiencing someone who's running payroll who made a mistake. There is like a lot of variation. And so when you're thinking about how do I sort out this challenge or this pain point or this problem that I'm navigating, we see that the use of language and how people are thinking about it is really important. And so for us, thinking about it's like that trend of reframing is like taking a step back and saying, like, with the person that we're supporting, perhaps there's something going on that's intentional here. Maybe there's not. Like, let's explore kind of what you need and what's available. How do we think about the situation together in a way that gets you to the best outcome? So, for example, the wage theft one that I mentioned, not everyone wants to take a legal action for that. Like, at the end of the day, what someone values may be like, I just want to be able to have a conversation with someone internally about what I'm experiencing. Obviously, they want to get paid, but like, for them, their goal might be like, I just want to be able to have this conversation. For someone else, it might be like, I want to take legal action. So providing that space to think through, what's your sort of objective in this, or what do you want to achieve going forward? How does that align with your values or not? And creating that space to like maybe not have the right word to call it, or like you're unsure where it falls, I think is really important for helping someone feel like they're not alone, that they have a resource, that they have the support that they need. And it's a totally great place to be able to like be embarrassed, like, or like feel like you could say something that you may not be able to say to a partner or a friend, like acknowledge that you don't know something, which can be really scary. Being able to say that in a space where you're like, I don't know who this person is on the other side, but they just seem invested in my success, and I can like say that, and that's really helpful and cool.
So, again, all very different services and products, but connecting to people when they're feeling their most vulnerable or really hard times in their life. And something I love in our prep call that we talked about is you're not just building tech companies, whether it's for-profit or non-profit, but you're building a service company that's built on human connection. And what that means, you have a digital interface, and Sandy, I remember you said this, you can't automate everything, right? As much as we would like to, there's a human component that is so essential in what you're providing. So how critical, I mean, obviously it's critical, but more so in the way that you scale, and think about the way that you scale and providing your service to more people. How is that coming up in conversations to do that with that human connection at the core of everything you do?
So one of our products that actually isn't facing the employee is actually the coaching dashboard. How our community of providers actually interact with Modern Health and interact with Modern Health's clients. And I remember internally we debated for a long time, do we leverage Twilio and a third party to, just have folks text, because millennials love to text. But we decided to double down and build our own in-house chat app. And with that, we actually had to think about building out a dashboard for our network of providers, our coaches and our therapists. What we really thought about was, how do we actually make sure that we leverage technology to enhance the human connection, right? A lot of these providers are very isolated. They're sort of in their own clinical practice, and what they're really craving is community and a way to actually build community and share best practices. Now, the coaches that we work with, they go through a training program like CTI or ICF, but they really want to cross over that bridge and learn mindfulness and cognitive behavioral therapy or acceptance and commitment therapy. So in essence, we have continuing education for the coaches as well. Now, within that coaching dashboard, maybe this is too technical, but I think it's really interesting because we can essentially scale care, use sentiment analysis and use AI to actually enhance and templatize certain responses when and if someone is in a crisis. And the coaches and providers can then insert courses and meditation recordings and links for the clients so that they have homework to do during off hours or something like that. So it's using technology to enhance human care so that it's a tech-enabled product.
So I often say at Honor that there's always a human behind the technology and there's always technology behind the human. And so even, I know, right? Sounds like catchy. And so one of the things that's really important to how we build product and technology at Honor is that it's always in service of the care delivery, right? And so I say this a lot, we can't send a robot to do care. Right? Like I cannot send a robot to help my mother out of bed and go to the bathroom and brush her teeth. I'm going to send a warm, high-touch, amazing person to do that, which will form an intimate relationship with my mother. And so our job as engineers and product people and designers at Honor is to how do we create the right tools, the right insights, the right interfaces for the care delivery to be really, really good, right? One common complaint that we heard from caregivers when we interviewed them was, I don't even know what the house is like that I'm going to. Like, I don't know if my client is 300 pounds. I don't know if she has cats in the house. I'm allergic to cats. I don't know if she's a hoarder. I don't know if she, has trouble bathing. And so just providing that information was novel, right? Which is like amazing, but also like shocking. And so one of the things that we often do, and I tell a lot of our engineers and product designers and folks at Honor is you need to strip away your assumptions on how technology works, right? We are not caregivers. A lot of us are not. We are not people getting care. And so to experience what that is like is amazing, but also it has to inform how we build things. And so the technology that we build, most of it is actually internal to provide the right tools and insights to our care delivery team to deliver the right care. It's not about the app, it's not about the website or consent, whatever. It's literally the human being that goes to someone's home. And so whatever we can do to make that experience amazing is what we do on the services side. So we come out as a services company, even though we have an amazing tech team, some of who are sitting in the audience. So great job, guys.
So one of my favorite moments running Online SOS was somebody had requested help. She was a streamer on Twitch. Are you guys familiar? Okay, great. I was in to check. But she was a streamer on Twitch, and her fan was extorting her. Her fan had hacked her iCloud and found an intimate image and was threatening her, like, if you don't do this, if you don't stream that, if you don't say this. And so she had, and it leads up into physical, like, real life, where, and you know, the line between online and offline has now disappeared, but the person was also threatening to come to her place of employment, her work. And she was attempting to get a temporary restraining order across state lines, and she wasn't able to do that. And we were able to do that for her in 4 hours. But the key insight was having somebody else advocate for you, which sounds like, what? You know? However, we were able to call the police chief of a certain station and get that done. And yes, it was 4 hours of our life, and it wasn't us building technology, but it gave us insight to, okay, well, how can we use this information to build better technology? Or like have checks and balances and encourage people to have an advocate, for example. And so the tension between service and tech is, I've lived through that and we've shared that a little bit, but I don't know, I feel like the best technology built comes from these types of stories.
I think going back to sort of dovetailing off of what you just shared, sometimes what's needed is not scalable. And I think there's this real focus, particularly in San Francisco, and I'm originally from Texas, and I moved out here a couple years ago, and I think there's this real, like, the answer has to be scalable. Like, everything has to be, like, the most amazing, and we have to do it in these amazing ways. And sometimes, like, the human parts are not scalable, and, like, that's okay. There was this brilliant piece, for anyone who reads any of Courtney Martin's work. She wrote this piece in the New York Times, I think a couple weeks ago, that was talking about this center in San Francisco that was doing really amazing care around end of life. And they were getting a lot of pressure, like, how do you scale? Like, how do you scale what had been 10 bedrooms, and it was, you know, very successful in what it did. And the answer was, like, maybe what's really awesome about it is that it doesn't scale. And so that's not to say that I don't think any of our solutions should scale. I mean, we've built Empowerwork to be a scalable solution, so I believe that part of that is building to the need. So what we saw was that 95% of working Americans have experienced a work challenge so severe that they have left their job. And half of those that we interviewed left with no next job lined up, took pay cuts, or otherwise had cumulative career or economic or well-being impacts. So for us, like, we're building to scale because the scope of the challenge is one that needs a scalable solution. Like, workplaces are not working for most working Americans, and you know, a text-based service is not going to solve for that. But we provide individual support, and then we can actually also take the data and reflect it back and say, look, these are trends and needs and changes that need to take place. Not necessarily company specific, but like industry specific or geographically specific. So one of our goals as we scale is to actually provide this data back to governments to say, for instance, this is how many people indicated they might report to the EEOC something that's happened. How many reports have you actually had? The discrepancy between those two is actually really interesting, I think, as someone who cares about data, to say, like, what's broken in the system that someone could be experiencing something that's worth reporting and doesn't do that? Like, what do we need to change in other places? What do we need to change from a policy perspective, from a practice perspective? So for us, it's starting with humans at the center, but it's thinking about what's the system that this is a part of that touches people's lives, and how do we address that? And I'll just put one last plug in, like, not everything has to scale.
All right, so the tech initially built to improve human connection kind of feels like it's turning against us in many ways. And millennials in particular, right, are dealing with a new slew of issues of burnout from being connected 24/7 while also having, you know, new responsibilities, caretaking for our aging parents in addition to our kids. And just, there's something really ironic about kind of creating these solutions using technology as a result of problems created by technology. So what do you make of that?
Tech can be the problem, but it can also be the solution. So I think it's on us to set boundaries. I think, what is the statistic? By 2020, 50% of the workforce will be made up of by millennials. By 2025, it'll be 75% of the workforce. So really, millennials have embraced technology, so has Gen Z, and we make up a major sector of the workforce. In terms of how it can be part of the solution, the reason why we didn't go down the AI chatbot route for personalized care and being an AI chatbot as a coach or therapist, I firmly believe that when you can text someone at 2 a.m. and get a response, that develops a codependent relationship with your AI chatbot, right? So what I think about a lot is, what is the future of modern health? You know, investors will push us, what's your DAOs and your MAUs, your daily active users and our monthly active users? At what point is engagement good enough so that we equip people with the right amount of information so that they are resilient? So it's preventative, and they come to us as their safe space when and if there is a time of crisis, but they can spread mindful communication and emotional resilience to their community. So I feel like this is something I'm still thinking about. We don't want folks to get addicted to technology, and there's a fine balance there.
So I'm going to use a reframing trick that we've been using all night long. One thing that we often actually say when we talk to investors, because traditionally there's been no investment in the senior space, because they're like, wow, seniors and technology, it's not going to work. Is that if you think about a toaster or a television or a car, those are all technology, right? But our 92-year-old grandparents use those things every day. And so when we think about how we provide service, caregiving, home care, all these sort of home-related care services, we're framing it in a way that, look, it's a human going to your home. They're going to be powered by technology and all the things that we do in the background, but that should not be your primary concern, so that we're hiding all of the complexity and all of the sort of amazing insights, et cetera, et cetera. All you have to worry about is having a great relationship with your caregiver. And so the sort of fading the technology the way into the background, I think, is a really great strategy in the sense that there's technology everywhere. There's not one company out here in the world that's successful that is not based in some sort of technology. Like, that is just the way the world works. But if you don't put it front and center, you don't slam it into someone's face, and you don't force it into someone that doesn't actually want it, and you kind of reframe it in a way that makes it comfortable, familiar, traditional, that makes it a lot easier to then work together in a world where you kind of have to have technology. You just can't get away from it, but you can do it in a way that's actually workable.
Those are great answers, so I defer my time.
Yeah, the only other thing I'm going to add is that I think this aspect of like muscle building, which is really important, whether it's like muscle building by using a technology to focus that muscle elsewhere, so like on the care itself, is one that we see a lot of benefit from with volunteers. And people have asked us, because we're a nonprofit model, we leverage volunteer peer counselors as part of our model. And people are like, volunteers aren't scalable, or different things. And part of it is that we see that actually that muscle building, not having a chatbot, provides a way to affect change in different ways. So people, I think in some ways the technology that we're using, we've missed aspects of that human connection. And what we see with our volunteers is they tell us, like, they go back into their workplaces and they're better managers, they're better colleagues, because they're practicing something that they don't always get a chance to practice in the workplace. And so I think it's a different way of using technology to facilitate that in-person connection. And even some of our volunteers who are trained, we're like ICF, it's like International Coaching Federation, trained professional coaches who are like, I have to think about things differently when I don't see the person's emotions on the other side, or someone's body language. Like, you have to read into situations a little bit differently. So I do think there can be benefit to the technology, but I love your framing of moving to the back and moving other pieces forward.
And learning about your companies. I know community partnerships were a really critical part in being able to get to where you are now. So can you talk a little bit about the role that these partnerships have had in building your ecosystem, how they've helped to enable what you're really out to do?
Well, we're a startup, and so the name of the game is fail fast and iterate really quickly. So I've been very fortunate in the sense that my community I've been working at UCSF and Stanford School of Medicine for my whole career, so I have a whole clinical network to leverage, and they've been able to share their insights on building the foundation of modern health. And it goes back to Y Combinator, build something that people want and talk to your users. So yes, our users are the employees using our services, but there's another user group. It's actually our provider group too. So we do CSAT scores with our users, our members, but at the same time, we want to make sure our providers are happy. And so it's constantly collecting feedback. Every single quarter, we do user research with our members and iterate and improve our product. But at the same time, with our providers, we constantly do user research with them too. How are the matches that we're providing you? How did your video sessions, how did your in-person sessions go? Are we sending you the right clients? Do you want to see more content? Is there something you want to learn about? And so it's community managing so that it's professional development for our community of providers as well.
So when we started Honor, we literally had to build a home care agency from scratch to know what it was like to do home care. And so we talked to a bunch of agencies, just helpful people, people who've been in the industry for 20, 30 years. And we found these same similar stories over and over again that they would tell us, be like, oh my God, I'm so tired of getting the 2 a.m. calls. My caregiver called off, I have to go do the care myself. Or, oh my God, I have to go and hire 4 more caregivers because I have 4 more clients, I don't know what to do. And so the majority of these agencies are actually owned by they're literally moms and pops. So they're husband and wife pair, they love helping their community, and they just started a home care agency. And so when we started our own home care agency, we're like, wow, we're learning a lot of stuff. We have the added benefit of cheating because we had $20 million of funding when we started, unlike a lot of home care agencies. And so we were just, we're iterating, creating better technology, getting the right insights, kind of speeding along. But as an entrepreneur, I want to go even faster. And so what we found was that could we leverage and partner with the current industry, right? A lot of, I think Silicon Valley has a reputation of coming into an industry and just saying, oh, the older players don't know anything. We're going to come in and be the new hot stuff. And we decided to not do that and more how can we work with existing agencies to partner. And so what we ended up doing was forming this Honor Care Network, which was just leveraging all the existing agencies in the market by giving them help by providing operational know-how and success and caregiver management, which we're really good at. And they're really good at having those deep community relationships to be able to find their clients, spread the word, help clients on a more personal basis, which would take us a lot longer because we're not deeply embedded in those communities. And so that's created a boost start to our growth, and I'm really proud to say that we work with a lot of agencies now. We help a lot more people, and we've grown a lot faster, which just means that the impact that we have is that much greater, which is really exciting. So if you happen to know anybody running a home care agency, let them know that we're available to help partner. But definitely the partner network at Honor has definitely made us really, really thankful because it just gives us that much more ability to help a lot more people.
Building on partnering with communities or embedded, we are experts around online harassment, but not in the Twitch community or the journalist community, or we've also partnered. Unfortunately, online harassment has been used to exacerbate domestic violence and domestic in relationships, and so we've gone out of our way to invest time and to do outreach in communities so that our information and our tools can be used and shared in a way that's authentic. authentic in the community.
We partner with organizations, particularly that reach underserved, less resourced or underserved workers. So for us, partnership and community is a really big component. And for us, I think it's a big piece of it's like the work landscape is so large. There's so many puzzle pieces and facets that touch someone's work life. And for us, we want to make sure that we're available and working in partnership with a range of those. So it's a couple of different communities. It's like communities of volunteers, communities of partners. And I think for each of those, it's really helpful to both reach the community that we intend to serve, as well as align around similar pain points. Like, we have shared goals of, I think similar to what Sandy shared, like shared goals with a lot of our partners of seeing people set up for success in the workplace. So how do we partner in ways that meet both of those goals?
So your organizations are a mix of for-profit and non-profit. What was the decision in choosing one over the other? Tax code.
Well, employers were asking for it. That's the TLDR. Employers were asking for it. My co-founder, her role at Collective Health before we started Modern Health was in product partner operations. And so Collective Health, in essence, it's a marketplace for digital health companies. So you can plug and play, you know, an Amada, a Lantern, a Joyful, what have you. And everything that we were seeing on the marketplace was just a simple point solution, right? If you rolled out a headspace to your company, meditation recordings isn't going to necessarily help someone with bipolar disorder or OCD, right? So we really needed to innovate on a platform solution to actually triage folks to the right care at the right time. So that's why we decided to go the employer route. Now with that said, we're rolling out to mining companies, pizza companies, we're rolling out to our first public school system. We're actually rolling out to a hospital in West Virginia to track physician burnout. And so the sky's the limit, and we're seeing that it's completely industry agnostic. My goal, because I'm really passionate about early education and giving back to the Girls Who Code community, and mentoring women in medicine and science, I want to eventually give away 10% of our product for free. So, sky's the limit we're seeing with mental health.
So, like I said before, there's been traditionally no investment or very, very little investment in the senior space by venture capitalists. Like I said before, I've started companies before, and my co-founders started companies before, so starting a for-profit company, the structure and the capital funding situation was more natural to us. And also, like my fellow panelists here, we really wanted to build a platform where we could spread really fast and grow nationally and hopefully internationally. And so part of it was sort of the, can I bring a lot of capital into the space and signal that this is something that we can actually innovate in. Other known fact, once Honor got funding, a lot of other home care type companies got a lot of funding after we sort of like made a big splash, which is actually great, just because it means that there's more attention and more capital in the space. And so that's been a great vehicle for us to just kind of reach our goals.
So we didn't decide on nonprofit or for-profit until later. So we chose the nonprofit route partly because back in 2016, online harassment wasn't well understood, and it was a way to build trust and work with competing platforms. Like, how can you have conversations with Wikipedia and Facebook at the same time, and Twitter? In hindsight, I have some regrets or thoughts about that. Like, hey, how maybe we could have scaled in a different way if we were for-profit. But fascinating 501c3 versus for-profit model conversations.
I think that we had a big discussion about this, and actually our now board chair and I remember she's actually at BC. We sat down and we like talked about the different models, and really it was following the user need. So in our research, what we saw was this huge gap. And as I mentioned before, it was sort of like, if you work at an employer who will provide that service, that's amazing. I mean, that's so great. And there are a lot of different ways in which that's happening now, in innovative ways, through new reporting platforms, through new coaching tools, and things like that, which is so great. But what exists on the enterprise side and what exists on the consumer side leaves this huge gap for about 80 million Americans in the middle. And the average working American only has about $400 in savings. So when you have this sort of potential livelihood-threatening career option where you might be leaving your job with no next job lined up, the feasibility of either leveraging something that most likely your company doesn't have or paying for something yourself just doesn't exist. So when we thought about how we structured, it wasn't about, you know, what do we care about for taxes? It was just like, how do we best serve this need in the middle? And what that means is that we can have revenue. Like, we have revenue streams, but that revenue goes back to ensuring that we stay free and accessible to as many people as who need it. There's no barrier to entry. You don't have to enter a credit card. You don't have to pay for something up front. You can connect with someone, no questions asked. And for us, that was a big piece of making sure that, you know, if your boss puts a meeting on your calendar in 15 minutes and you're worried you're going to get fired and you're worried you're going to lose your health care and how are you going to pay for childcare, you don't have to figure out, like, how am I also going to pay to talk to somebody? Like, there's just someone there.
All right, for my last question, we're going to do a little bit of time travel. So 5 to 10 years from now, how do you see us accessing our healthcare and the way that we take care of ourselves, our families, our employees?
2020 politics. I'm really curious what the state of the nation will be in 2020. In 5 to 10 years, I really hope that we can innovate on our healthcare system. Australia, the UK, Canada, these are all countries who are doing a stepped care model, and they're 2 years ahead of us. But San Francisco is really innovative, and of course, the Bay Area is very innovative. So I really hope that we can shift to a value-based care model for healthcare, and we don't have something as antiquated as filing an out-of-network insurance claim just to go see a therapist. You know, navigating all that red tape, because those folks who actually need that care the most, lowering that barrier to entry is going to be key. So that's my hope.
I have a much more simpler answer, which is I think healthcare should just be less scary. It's just so complicated. There's acronyms, there are these sort of like in-network, out-of-network, these terms that just the normal American just has no idea what they're doing. They don't understand the costs, they don't understand what they can do for help, understanding how I can balance my child's healthcare with my healthcare, with my parents' healthcare. What is healthcare? What, you know, it's so confusing. Even the fact that I have to fax things in and it's 2019 just seems crazy. So I think I would love for a system where my kids don't have to worry about understanding a whole dictionary of jargon to even understand the basics of what they need, what they can provide for their families. That would be amazing.
So in 5-10 years, my hope is that there are clear remedies on what to do when you're experiencing something online that is a threat. And so right now, I think regulation and legislation is being developed, but 5-10 years from now, having that be stronger. And then the question that I'm asking myself is, what will Facebook look like in 10 years? Right? Like, what platforms will we be using, and how will we be connecting with our communities online? Hopefully you guys are building that too.
Someone has a solution. I think for me, the biggest thing personally is disaggregating the social safety net from employment. And I don't know that that's going to happen in 5 to 10 years, but I think increasingly there are too many things that are piling into someone's employment. And that gets at different structures, obviously different political changes. But I think that the fact that too many aspects of livelihood are tied, and there are innovations in the space where people are looking at, like, how do you have transferable benefits, right, that go from company to workplace to workplace? How do you support folks who are working in non-traditional? How do you change classifications for gig workers? There were, you know, some very disturbing things that came out of this administration recently about classifying gig workers. So how do we think about the structure of work in the future so that you have the opportunity to thrive and not just survive, and that you're not worried about, you know, whether it's your health care or your mental health or caretaking, that those are not tied to whether or not you have a job.
Thank you so much. And at this point, we're going to turn it over to the audience for your questions. So we don't have a wireless mic out there. So if you have a question, if you can first raise your hand and try to say it as loudly as possible, and I'll do my best to consolidate and repeat. Any questions out there? We'll start back there. Yes, you.
Yeah. To what degree do you think most of your audience, or majority of your audiences, you have diverse audiences, but are they mostly women? And if so, do you see that as a feature or a bug going forward?
Most of your audience is women. Do you see that as a benefit? Did you know where that could go?
So we had this question come up a lot when we started, because a lot of people are like, oh, so like you must be geared towards women. And it was like, well, you can also be, I mean, I'm married to a straight white guy. And I think you would be okay with that classification. And like, in order to have systemic change, you have to have a place for everyone to be able to fail a little bit. And so I think what Empowerwork offers is a space where like, we predominantly serve women, and we predominantly serve women of color. So 78% of our texters self-identify as women. We also found that there is a bias in self-reported data. So that self-reported data actually doesn't, I think, show how many men or non-binary individuals use our service. And we see in the context of conversations, sometimes people sort of hedge their bets around what they're discussing, because there can be aspects of shame or embarrassment. And we want to create a space where anyone can talk through a challenge. So yes, we don't specifically market ourselves as like, this is a women-based service. Most of our women, and most of our users self-identify as women. That makes sense in the larger context of what people experience. Women disproportionately experience more harassment, more discrimination, and more adverse behaviors in the workplace. So it makes sense that our users would represent what that experience is. But we don't specifically market, because we want to create a space where anybody who's experiencing something can come in and discuss that.
So actually, the last time I looked at modern health data, 50% of our users are men. And they were the majority of our users at one certain point in time. And I remember a CNBC reporter asking us, so you guys are tricking men into therapy, you know, which would make a lot of women happy. But I think it's because we think about inclusion and belonging as part of our core product offering. You know, choosing the right colors and making sure that the language is just right so that it includes everyone. One thing I'm super proud of in the HR world, you know, because a lot of our buyers are chief human resource officers or chief people officers. There's something super outdated called an eligibility file, right? And it's something you export from an HR system, and usually it's just a CSV or an Excel spreadsheet of a first name, last name, email address, so on and so forth. But we can use this to provision registration and access to our platform. Now in the sex column, this hasn't been innovated upon since like 1970, because it's just male or female. And this is something we've pushed all of our employers who work with us to do, is just at least offer they or other as an option. It's the 21st century after all. So bit by bit, little bits of change. Please. Yeah, I'd like to answer.
I guess the quick answer is that the traditional stereotype is that the caregiver is usually the adult child and woman. It actually turns out a lot of our family caregivers are men as well. The workforce of caregivers themselves, professional care professionals, they are majority women, but there's a high demand for men. So it's actually an industry where if you are a man, it's actually it's a rarity. And we do look for male caregivers just because it helps round out the population. People want to talk to males as well, but it'd be great to have more parity there as well.
All right, we have another question, I think. What's that? All right, I think he was next. And then did you have a question as well, sir? Okay, yeah, we'll come back to you, I promise. Yes.
It seems like each one of your services is creating a target-rich environment for security risks. whether it's something to create exploitation or just embarrassment or even damaging an organization because a lot of their employees are reporting negative things. How do you balance the need to create security, which is, it's hard to get a real return on that, with the drive to create features that
So balancing security and managing security risks with the need to create new features, more or less.
You hire a head of engineering who comes from a security background and used to be a director of security. No, but this is a valid concern. And number one, we thought that trust was something that we needed to earn with our users. In fact, it's actually the opposite. Trust is something for us to lose. And so that's my biggest fear, and that's why we have a dedicated team to security and compliance. So it's really important for us to actually build out an architecture that keeps all information aggregated and confidential and anonymous. So making sure that we're HIPAA compliant, that we're tracking towards SOC 2 Type 2, GDPR compliance, because right now we're international as well. So we've implemented internationalization from day one because we wanted our services to be accessible in Turkey, in Korea, in the UK. And so GDPR just puts us at a different level for international security and how we handle our data too. So it's definitely a full-time job.
And the answer for us is that we have people's lives and their life assets in our hands because care is expensive and we're taking care of people in a very vulnerable state. The way we look at it is we actually do have employees who use our service, and so we are literally taking care of our own employees' families. And so you have to take that responsibility extremely seriously, so that permeates the entire culture. So it's part of just sort of understanding and respecting the fact that you are holding two actually very vulnerable populations, the caregivers and the people receiving care, and then understanding that the quality at which you have to hold yourself is just extremely high.
We've invested a lot in especially in the very beginning, around not only cybersecurity, but also social engineering type threats. And so that's been kind of on the radar for us day one.
All of those things, basically. One of the things we do, we talk with folks about individuals. So as part of our terms of service, we ask that people not disclose the name of their company. We find that actually people are really good about that. And we see that a lot of our texters are very good about not disclosing any identifiable information. So we ask, for instance, to not share the names of coworkers, to not share the name of the company, specifically for individuals, because it's SMS, so like anyone can pick up their phone, like what's enabled on their phone, we don't know. So we want to make sure that we support the texter to protect their own, and then also, right, putting all of these pieces in place. But because of specifics at SMS, it's a little bit different.
So let's go to the question on the screen here. How do you balance optimizing on the product via the data collected and in some of your cases, share data with the government while ensuring HIPAA compliance?
Yeah, I think this one is I think it's geared towards us.
Okay.
Yes, because I mentioned sharing data. So the data that we look at is aggregate and anonymized. So we tag conversations based on themes. So like, for instance, are people presenting with an issue around a manager? And so we'll look at like what percentage of conversations present around a manager issue. In those ways, they're disaggregated from any contextual context. It's like one of those points where like, I wish I had a little more caffeine. They're disaggregated from the conversation itself, and we're looking at those larger trends and themes. So by that, we don't share any specific data.
Okay. Thank you. All right, we had a question over here.
So we mentioned a lot about all of your guys' service centering around human, like it's human giving care and volunteers providing advice and all these things. So how do you ensure the quality of like that soft skill that is being given to the people? Because you see in the news like there could be crime, there could be somebody who's not very good giving a bad advice and causing bad consequences. So how do you ensure that it's good?
So the people providing the service have to ensure those soft skills.
Well, first and foremost, I think that's a wonderful question. I take quality over quantity any day of the week. So first and foremost, we have to vet all of our providers and make sure that they're credentialed, that they have an active license, that there's no dings against them. And once they go through our vetting and interviewing process, we actually make sure that they're constantly trained. You know, security and compliance training. This is something that I actively think about. You know, we actually ensure the same level of security and compliance training to our contractors, the same as full-time employees. And then after that, we have a rating system to make sure that our users feel comfortable with the providers and that they have to keep a certain level of rating, similar to, you know, like Uber drivers or Lyft drivers, you know, being data-driven in that sense as well.
So for us, the caregivers, obviously there's a large population of them. One of the things that the industry has not done really well is actually performance manage. When you actually talk to the care professionals, they actually crave this. They don't know what they're doing well or how to get better. Oftentimes they're rewarded for tenure, but not quality of care. And so one thing that we actually try to do, and because we have things like data, is we can track performance, we can track how well they do well, we can track feedback. It can actually normalize a lot of the feedback. For example, you might have a senior who just rates everybody really badly because they're really, disagreeable, right? And so you don't want that to punish that care code. So having a good idea of like what good is actually super subjective. And so it's actually a science around trying to figure out what like a quality care pro is. And that's something we actually struggle with because it's very subjective. But yeah, just instrumenting data, getting feedback, and collecting feedback is something that is good for them and actually really good for us.
Yeah, no, I second the question. I would just add, I love when Erica mentioned the sort of strengths-based approach earlier, because I think there's always this tendency of like, how do you do quality control, which is so thoughtful and great. And I would say overwhelmingly what we see is that folks who express interest in volunteering are usually self-selected who are overqualified. I think for when folks, particularly from a volunteering perspective, it's almost like they feel like they have to be at this even better level, right? And in addition, we provide 20 hours of training. We have oversight. I love the focus on feedback. One of the reasons why I think our volunteers have such a great experience is that, as I mentioned, they get to build that muscle, and part of building the muscle is not just having the conversations, but actually getting feedback on it. To say, to partner with our team and say like, I feel like that question didn't land in the way that I wanted to. And a lot of coaches don't get that practice or care providers, because you're in that one-on-one and someone may not be comfortable providing that feedback. When you have it in a space where you can actually practice and like build that and get feedback from others, it actually continues to make you better, and it allows us to have quality control from a sense of like, we can see all of that as well.
Oh, you just reminded me of something. So along with user feedback, a new feature that we're rolling out, because sometimes it's really awkward when you get matched with a coach or a therapist and you sort of unload and bond with them, but there's something called the therapeutic alliance. It's not quite there. You should look forward to meeting with your coach or your therapist, and a lot of folks don't know this, and they feel really awkward. It's almost like a breakup. And finding a coach or a therapist, it's a lot like dating, So now, because of that feedback, we're rolling out like an additional Modern Health support chat so that you could always talk to a Modern Health support person to help you do that breakup and roll off and put in a new coach or therapist on your dashboard.
Excellent. All right, we've got time for one more question.
Right there.
Right here. All right.
So I know for sure the marketing is
Maybe could you come on over just so everyone can hear you say
So I
it.
know the marketing is a big thing, and I know for sure that maybe a target for super big companies is so easy, right? But for you guys that have a very narrow and a very niche group of people, because it's a service, right? And it's a very sensitive topic. How do you handle that? Like, how do you approach to people in need? And how are those marketing skills offer a service of that?
Yeah, I can. Okay.
That was good. I don't know if I can consolidate. I need caffeine as well.
I can
I'm there with
consolidate.
you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's a great question.
Thank you.
So to recap that question, how do you reach people where they are? And so what does that marketing look like, particularly when you're dealing with sensitive topics? And that's something that we've thought a lot about, is sort of where are people experiencing their work challenges? How do we show up in places? And so for us, we've actually done a lot of testing over the past year. And one of the most successful things that we found, which was not what we would initially have hypothesized, were bus ads. In a lot of ways, it makes sense. So Muni actually very generously donated 500 bus ads for us to test messaging around San Francisco as PSAs. And what we found was that it was mind-blowingly successful. And it was because people were on their way to or from work, and we would get people texting us saying, like, I just called in sick to work, I'm facing something so challenging. And so it was what for us was a little bit counterintuitive. You're in a very public space at a very vulnerable moment, and it's also the place that you're thinking about your work challenge. So we're actually rolling that out and doing additional testing over the next 6 months. So actually next week, we're gonna have 1,000 PSAs across Seattle, thanks to intersection and sound transit. We are going to be in 900 office building elevator ads, all donated for free. So in terms of thinking about cost of acquisition, for us as a nonprofit, that changes the game. And so we have very generously had donated elevator ads in 900 office buildings across the United States. And a lot of it is sort of where are we meeting people where they are. And we thought that was originally having to do like entrusted small spaces, which becomes very difficult to scale. And what we realized is that actually the places that you're most thinking about work can be very public and very visible and very vulnerable.
A question in the back, I don't know if we have time.
Let's see, did anyone else want to answer that last
Oh, I was going to say, no one like looks at an ad about home care and then thinks, I should talk to my mom about that dinner tonight. So reaching our population is actually pretty difficult because it's one of those things that happens very acutely. It's like, oh my God, mom fell. I don't remember any of the things that I read about home care before. I didn't know what it was. And so one way we've actually solved that is through the partner network, because the partners have deep community relationships. And so they're the folks that the local church goes to, or the local fireman who knows all the neighbors. And so they're like, hey, my mom fell, I don't know what to do. And they're like, oh, have you heard of this thing called Honor or this local agency? And that's like the sort of leveraging kind of the grassroots community to really help spread that word, which is something that's been extremely successful for us because digital ads on Google or Facebook about home care, they just don't work.
This is a fun question for me because I feel like our entire book of business is just so diverse, and so we really have to think creatively how to engage different users because in essence, you're given free visits from your employer. Why wouldn't you take advantage of free visits? It could be 8 visits, 20 visits to go see a coach or a therapist, all at no cost to you. Just a few clicks away, right? You could get matched to your personal coach or therapist and digital tools. So we have great engagement compared to, traditional, the traditional EAP or other competitors, positive psychology and all that. But we find that our users are usually those who are in front of their computer or who have access to a smartphone. So what I love thinking about is how do we engage our pizza truck drivers, or how do we engage our furniture workers working at Walmart, for example. So we find that whenever we identify a champion in an organization, and we have a champion within an organization to post ads, include modern health in recruiting and onboarding, or posting it as a benefit for a job board, then it works really well, and then it spreads awareness across the organization.
So it looks like we do have one more question, and we can definitely squeeze it in. Yes?
Hello, my name is Ashley. Thank you so much for having this panel. My question is, how are you all using or implementing racial equity and cultural components into your services, or analyzing data in a way using racial equity?
So yeah, how are you incorporating racial equity to your services?
I also love this question because that's something we're fiercely debating right now on the product team. People don't know this about me, but you know, my mom is one of 9 kids to escape communism from Vietnam. So she's Chinese Vietnamese. Her house was bombed 2 times. So she's the first generation. She's first generation to immigrate to the United States. So she met my dad, who's Swedish Scottish, in the melting pot of New York City. And they moved around for 10 years before settling in the Bay Area because they experienced a lot of discrimination as an interracial couple. They decided to teach my brother and I Mandarin Chinese as our first language. So thinking about cross-cultural approaches to a mental health platform is super interesting, right? From an inclusion and belonging perspective. Now, one thing we notice when folks pick and choose their coach, the therapeutic alliance wasn't necessarily there because they're picking the best looking professional support. And so one idea we're playing with right now is do we include last name and do we include an avatar instead? These are all the sorts of questions that we're hoping to solve by looking at the data, but we don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel. I feel like Airbnb has a data science team, and they've done a lot of wonderful A/B experiments in inclusion and belonging. But would love to hear your thoughts, maybe after the panel too. I feel like you have some great ideas.
So Honor itself is actually really diverse. Our more than half the company is actually comprised of women, just because in order for us to deliver the right service, we actually have to be diverse, not just from backgrounds, but just from where we come from in terms of our working experience. We have folks from tech, from hospitality, from healthcare, from all sorts of places. It's also because our workforce is actually predominantly very diverse as well. The majority of our care pros are women of color, or immigrants, where English is not their first language. And so it's something that we have to deal with on a daily basis. So just being open to the fact that, you know, sometimes small fonts on an app in English are really difficult, or making interfaces really clear, making instructions really visible, really clear, so that if someone has issues or it's not their first language, or they come from different backgrounds, it's something that's very accessible. So it kind of permeates everything how we do, just because that's the makeup of our company.
We've done a lot of research in specific communities before making our recommendations, particularly around recommendations on seeking support from law enforcement. And so it's, I mean, we've incorporated that in our user research and outreach.
Part of the reason we started was exactly for that reason. So when I mentioned our research around who it disproportionately impacts, these work challenges, it disproportionately impacts women and women of color. So as we've built our product, every aspect of that has been included. So for instance, our volunteer demographics match our texter demographics, our advisors, our board, our staff, every single component of the way that we've built our service and the people that we've included as advisors, as champions, as partners, and the groups that we work with. So we work nationally with organizations that support less represented and less resourced groups. So that ranges from Europe, which is an amazing organization working with young people skilling into new jobs, to tech ladies. And those partnerships are very intentional, and those partnerships also inform our practices and community. So for us, it's really about making sure that every building block from the people who are involved to the way that the product is structured, as well as our training. So as part of all of our training for our volunteers, everyone goes through a 20-hour process that I mentioned that includes aspects of training to support all kinds of different conversations that come in, regardless of someone's background or experience.
But to be honest, I don't love my answer. And so, no, I mean, it's like it makes you think, well, what would racial equity look like, right? So when you're so busy trying to build, I could really see, I don't love my answer. And I think that's worth, me putting that out there.
All right, so before I hand it back to Susan, let's just give a round of applause.